I promise you guys that life is not what you believe. You have to understand that just recently, you have to understand that no matter what you're doing, you have to understand that what you see today is something that you cannot describe. I mean, this face is not really a face. You have to understand it's really something different. And now, it could be the image of God, although it's not. You have to understand that the whole point of seeing God is to disable everything you actually know. So, what do you know? I mean, whatever you know in life, I mean, it could be an apple or whatever. I don't even know what an apple is anymore. You have to understand that it's really that what you understand about life is not really that. I mean, let's just put it that way, because the only aspect of life that you understand is your eye. Your eye, you must know. You must know your eye and nothing else. I mean, everything else outside of you is irrelevant. And let's just put it in the trash, because everything else outside of you is something that you can never describe. You understand? Although, your eye is the most important. You understand? So, your eye leads straight into God. And now, everything outside of you is helping you right now to understand that you must go that way. Although, you have to understand that it's really that if you start labeling that that's a pillow and that's what that is and whatever, and if you say that is that and that is that, Roshi, that's not what that is. Roshi, that's not a pillow. Roshi, that's got nothing to do with you. Roshi, now, what is God trying to say here? Roshi, God is trying to say that the outside world is never to be labeled. And Jesus said, do not cut your eye out. And now, since the eye is so important, you judge nothing except eye. And that's that. So, to know something is to just know your eye and know nothing else. I mean, always be interested about what everything else is. You have to understand. Now, with eye, you'd be more interested in eye too. You understand? Because eye is something that you are. And now you always have to be more interested in yourself. You always have to be more interested in eye. You understand? So, what is the teaching here? I mean, the teaching is that no matter what you're doing in life, you have to know eye. And when you know eye, you also have to be more interesting. And you also have to speak more eye. And also have to do everything much more. You understand? So never cut your eye out. Which means always stay interested about your eye as well. Although you have to understand that everything else is unimportant. So it could be your wife. I mean, it could be your kids. I mean, it could be anything else. I promise you that the most important aspect is your eye. In Jesus' name. You understand? Because in Jesus' name, I promise you that we can see something. I promise you we can see something in Jesus. And now, what is it that we can see? I promise you we can see no image of Jesus. I promise you that means when you have no image of Jesus, you've never judged Jesus. Understand? Because you can never kill Jesus if you have no image of Jesus. I promise you now, that's the only difference. I promise you the only difference is that Jesus was killed by the Pharisees because Jesus appeared in front of their face. And they were asking Jesus, you have to show us that you're really God. Understand? And Jesus says, why don't you believe me now? Because I'm here. Understand? Because the image of God showed up in their face. And they did not believe Jesus. So what did they do? I mean, they killed him. I mean, they killed him to find out, is he truly God? And what did Jesus do? Well, Jesus rose 3 days later in front of their faces. Understand? And that's the story of Jesus. And that's a beautiful story. Although you have to understand that the amazing aspect of life is that you understand that you judge nothing. So you see this room here? I mean, I've got loads of stuff over here. And is it really stuff? I promise you it's not even stuff. I promise you that's the whole point. I promise you that's not the point of God. I promise you the point of God is that you never ever describe what something is. You understand? Because what something is I. Now, it's much better to describe it this way. You guys see I over here? You see I? Around here. Now, that's much better. That's all I. That's I. What is the world around you? I. I. I is my biological father. I is everything. I is my mindset. I is the world. I is everything. I mean, what do you see now? I mean, what are you going to see later? I mean, what's in the future? I is in the future. I mean, what else is Australia? I is Australia. I mean, that there is I. I. And now, how can you label I? You can never label I. You don't even know what I is. I mean, now we're in a state of God. I mean, now we're in a state of trance. I mean, now we're in a state of a better way. And now, what is a state of trance? I don't even know. Although, what's important here? You see, peace and derivative of this moment. Understand? Because everything in this moment describes God. You can feel the presence. You can see that the present moment is I. You can hear God, who is I. You can hear everything in life in I. You have to understand that when you are exalted by other people, you have to understand that it's not really them exalting you. You have to understand it's I. You understand? Because you don't judge them for exalting you. You just realize it's I. And then when it's I mean, what do? You just pack up and go. I mean, when they don't love you, you just pack up and go because it's I. I mean, why is it I? Because that's how you label them. You label them through I. And you say, they are I. So just go. And that's how you keep the 10 Commandments of God. You say, I am the 10 Commandments of God. Well, that's that. Because your I is the first letter in that sentence. And now when your first letter is always I, you must finish with I too. I realize now that no matter what, that you also is I. I is everything. And I is the most important. Because Jesus said so. And now when you're using the you, you're referring to I. You must understand. I must understand. Approaching now a question mark means I too. Whereas that those people who ask questions are asking about I. Whereas they're asking about I. Why? I. How? I. Who? I. When? I. What? I. Where? I. I is the answer. Who? You. Where? You. What? You. When? You. How? You. Why? You. Understand? Because that's the answer. Whereas now when you ask a question though, your ego is finished. And there's no ego when you're asking a question. What's the time? How are you? Where are you going? Why are you so nice? How come you're so beautiful? I mean, that's a genuine question. Why are you rubbish for? Why are you stupid? I mean, it's genuine. You're being real. You're being the truth. Understand? I promise you, it's a real question. And if they say it's a stupid question, you have to understand they're stupid because they never ask questions. Understand? Or else now, I call that the IUQ rule. Understand? And it's really, I use my I use the you, and I use the question in everything. And that's how I find God. I mean, where is God? I mean, God's in the present moment awareness. You may be thinking too much. You may say, wow, is that really God? Or that's God. Although you don't say wow, you say I. I is much more relevant to say. I mean, when you're singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you don't go dun, 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 dun. You don't say dun, dun, dun. You go I. Understand? Because I is much more important than dun, dun, dun. Understand? I. Or actually, that Jesus didn't say, don't cut your dun off. You understand? I mean, how fun is that? I mean, when you sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, you have to understand it's really I that you sing. You sing I because I is more important than the question and the you. You understand? I can always be with I. I can never be with you. I can never be with you. I can be with I though. I can never be with a question. I can be with I though. Whereas if I'm a question, I have to be I first. You understand? I have to be I first to be a question. Because Jesus didn't say, don't cut off your questions. I mean, Jesus really means and really said that you don't cut your eye off. Because that's all the questions you ever need. I mean, any answer to the question that you need is I. How do you do business? I. How do you make money? I. How do you get the woman? I. How do you have sex? I. How do you find God? I. I love you. I. You have all the questions and abilities solved right there. I mean, everything is solved for you right now. I mean, what do you do now? I. And you increase it. I is all there is. You just increase the I as much as you can. Every single day. You become present and you let go. You let go. I is everything. And now, what's the most important letter in the alphabet? I. I mean, the alphabet doesn't start with the A. And doesn't start, whereas the alphabet, in terms of the words, do not start how they do, except I. Actually, now, nothing is the way it seems. Because why? I realize it's because I. I mean, where am I dragging you in life? I'm dragging you towards I. Because I is the answer. I mean, what is God? I. And that's it. I mean, if you ever need the best description of God, I. I mean, it's not a chair. I mean, it's not a book. I mean, it's nothing else except I. I mean, do not cut your eye out. I. And without your eye, you'll never know God. I mean, if you have no I, and if you don't use the I in your language, I mean, if you don't use it, I mean, if you don't use it, you never will know God. I understand that if you don't understand what I just said, you never know I. I just know I all the time. I fool around this way. 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 You understand? Because guess what? You have to use the word I. I mean, you use the I more than once. I mean, you use it all the time. I mean, you live life once. You live life infinity and beyond with I in life. Understand? Because I is to be repeated. I is eternal. I is everything. Understand? So those who understand how to communicate in life are going to understand I presence, I life, I why, I how, I am now. I can show you how. I'm really that good. I understand who I am. I am who I am right now because I understand my I, which is my why. I understand who you are in the I. I mean, without an I, you can never say, I love you. You understand? So understand that each and every single day you live life in the I. I mean, what's that? Your kid may ask. You say, it's I. I? I love you. I mean, the kid's going to laugh. I mean, the kid's going to smile. Because I understand Instagram. I am Instagram. I am Instagram. I love my I. I mean, what's that, Dad? I mean, that's Weet-Bix in I. You say Weet-Bix in I? I mean, you forget the Weet-Bix. I mean, I is more important than that. Understand? I mean, everything else that you may have described in the dictionary and connected together is not really what it is. Except I. I mean, what else do you need to understand in life? I mean, are you able to use the word I love you? I mean, are you able to say it? I mean, you can do anything with that. You can use the word I and you can repeat it over again. And that's your only purpose in life. I mean, without that, you'll never even live life. You shall never even be without I. You can never be without I. Or else that when Shakespeare asked to be or not to be, I realized that it's much better to be than not to be. Although to be, you have to have I. I understand there are fireworks outside. Although, is it really outside? Or else it's not outside. I mean, where is it? Or else it's with I. I understand what sound is. I understand when I live my life, I live it much better than yesterday. I do it much better than yesterday. I do and feel everything I feel in the moment. I make sure that every single day, I do something according to a way, or else I do something according to a better way of life. So I understand to pause my videos when I do them. I understand to go and talk when I need to. And I understand that no matter what I do, I'm going to live a better life. And I'm not going to live a better life. I'm just living a better life. I'm living a better life now. And why? Because my I is increased. I use my I in every single sentence and word and dictionary. And whatever I do, I realize my I is my courage. And that's the only point in a courageous act, or in loving more, or in doing more, or whatever. I can increase the nice, beautiful production of my videos, and whatever I am, I can achieve it with my I. I can start now. I can do it now. I can get another video, I can do another video, and I can just label the I in it. I can label I, and I can do 24 hours of content every single day with just my I. Honestly, it's that simple. I can go and travel the world now with my I. I need nothing else. I can go and grab all the money in the world with my I. I can go and grab it because it's just I. You get it? I can go and do anything in life with I. I can go and speak to other people and I can be with my I. I can go and work in 9 to 5 and I can be with my I. I can go and live to 100 years of age and more. I can do it with my I. I can do it one time with my I. Although, guess what? I realize my I is much more than one time. You understand? Although, you have to understand that life is I. And now, when you're doing one time in life, you have to realize that what you've done previously is not going to work now. You have to understand that when I go on Spotify, for example, I'm so full of life now. Because I have no more of the old playlist that I used to have in terms of music. I have over 100 tracks that I used to listen to. And they're all nice, beautiful melodies, and I really love them because it brings me back to the memories. I mean, it brings me back to the memories. I mean, what memories? I mean, I had to stop lying to myself because I'm not a liar. So the ego makes you lie. And now the ego needs you to have a sum of a playlist of your life. Of all the favorite music you had. From the time you were born to this nightclub and what they were playing. And then when you went to your mum's house, she played this song. And now it's been 50 years later and you still remember that song. You understand? Because guess what? You're not supposed to remember that music. You're supposed to listen to it once and move on. I mean, don't have a favorite playlist on Spotify and then keep listening to the same old, same old, same old, same old, same old. And then same old, and same old, and same old, and same old. Because then you become same old, and you become old and old and old in life. And the whole point of a new renewal of your mind and to be born again is to go the new way and forget the 2019 music because today is 2020 music. And forget what was in the past because today is. And forget the past because today. You understand? Because today is much more important. So what did I do? I went and deleted over 300 tracks from my nice, beautiful melodies. I love I. You understand? So realize that each and every single day you do something, I make sure that you have everything you need. So I went into Spotify, I deleted all the music from that. In terms of offline music that I downloaded and that is saved into my energy mix and my chill mix that I used to love listening to. And now I don't hate it. I still love music. Although I just never loved the old music. And now, because I never love, I do love always. I always love. I just never go the old way. I never go what happened 2014 in terms of music. Or what happened in 2008 in terms of one person's album. In terms of one track they made. And I don't keep repeating the tracks. I mean, I used to repeat one song all day long. I used to believe that it inspires me or something. To listen to the same old, and same old. Or does it doesn't? I'm not same old. I'm something new now. Or does that when I go into Spotify now, I realize I ask myself the question. I ask I the question. I mean, where is the new music in Spotify now? I just go there. I don't care about anything else because when I play it once and I never hear it again. Because it keeps me in a new state of mind. And then there's other music gonna come. And I'll just go to that music. And then other music is gonna come. And I go and listen to that music now. Because it's more modern. You understand? I promise you now, if you go to Pontoon in Sydney or some type of nightclub, I promise you they play 90s music. I promise you they play 90s music and today's 2020. I mean, how old is that? I mean, that's old school. So never go where old school is. I mean, you'd be old school then. I mean, you'd be an old fella. You'd be an old, mature lady who is looking old in life. You understand? So never be them. I mean, look new and go where the new is. I promise you the best nightclub in the world is the one that plays the newest music. I promise you that's that. I promise you it's the newest music today. And it's played one time and fuck off. I'll play your music once and fuck off. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's all you get. You get to live life once in life. I mean, there's no second chances in life. You're a DJ, you come to my nightclub, I play all your music once and fuck off. You understand? Because that's how it is. I'll never play your music twice. You played it once already. You go somewhere else and play it. Actually, that's how it is. And now, why do I say this? I need you to understand that I recently went and opened the gates with my dogs, which is my biological father's dogs. And now, you have to understand the nice, beautiful miracle I have here. And it's really so beautiful that I'll show you the story. And now, I opened the nice, beautiful gates where I understand that I've never done that for dogs before. And I never did it for dogs. I did it for I. And now, I opened the gates because these dogs here have been living in this area of the front and backyard porch for over 5 years without even going through those gates. You understand? I opened those gates after 5 years and I let them free. I let them free to see what they're going to do. I mean, I never let them pass that gate because if they go past, I was afraid. I was afraid that they may run away and never come back because it's an open field. You understand? I mean, you have a front yard and then you open the gate and then your dogs may run away. I opened that gate. I opened for 2 dogs for I. I never opened for them. I opened to see what I can do. I opened it and I free the gates. And the dogs walk out and it's night time. And it's stormy weather. And it's raining and it's windy and it's darkness and there's no lights. You understand? And the dogs go. And I walk on the street and I see them just going into some other neighbor. I realize they're going into some other guy's neighborhood and some other woman's neighborhood. And they go over there and then I say, boys, I say, come on. I say, come here. I realize the boys, I realize my two dogs, which are my biological dad's dogs, because he only has them and it's his responsibility. And now the dogs come back and they realize something. I realize one of my dogs looks to this direction over here and he looks to see what's going on over here. Because no matter what, I realize something. I understand something now. I let the dogs back in the house because they came back. I mean, it's a miracle. I mean, after 5 years of the dogs living in this house and never being able to even walk out of those gates, I mean, they chose to come back. I mean, they chose to come back into my household here, or they chose to come back with my biological father over here. And now this house over here is not my house, although my house here inside is. Whereas now I'm not living outside, I'm living inside. Although the point is that I've seen a miracle here. I understand that those dogs would have never ever came back if they ran away. I understand one time that God will say, you either go now in this darkness of no lights and there is rainy and it's windy and you have no food and it's rainy, you have to understand, or you come back with your owners and they will give you food. It's going to be sunny and you have under the house where you can go and sleep and you're going to feel safer. I mean, the dogs had 3 decisions to make. And it's really that there is one decision only. And there's not 3 decisions, although one decision. Although what they could have done is either come back the first time round, which they did right now, and that means they're the smartest dogs to come back. Or the second decision is there is no second decision. Understand? So what happened? All those dogs are very smart, that they understand that if they left in that stormy weather and rainy weather with no food and no shelter and no owners, that they will get killed by somebody. I mean, somebody will kill them. And how? I mean, how do I see this? I promise you that the vet or somebody will pick them up from the street and put a nice, beautiful injection into them, and nobody will ever get those dogs. Now, the dogs will be separated and in separate cages. You understand? And then, if they don't find the owner, or they get killed. I mean, what did the dogs choose to do? I mean, the dogs chose to come back to the owners. I'm not the owner of the dogs. You remember? I'm not the owner of the dogs. I'll show you why, though. Really, I'll just show you this now. I'll show you everything. I promise you, it's really that you understand that the dogs chose to come back because they have one chance. I promise you, if I close that gate, I promise you, there's no coming back. Understand? I promise you, there's no coming back from that point. And now, how do I see this? I mean, it's stormy weather. I mean, it's raining. I mean, it's blowing wind. I mean, they have no food. I mean, it's really chilly. I mean, it's really cold. And there's no lights around. And it's darkness. I mean, it's nighttime. Understand? And there's no security if I shut the gates and they never come back. I mean, there's no security. I mean, it's a total risk for the dogs to go. I mean, you get it? I mean, if the dogs come back into the owner's house, because I gave them a decision over here. I gave the dogs a decision. I mean, either run now for free. I I mean, just go and get the fuck out. Or you come back to the owners and come back with us and sit in our household. I gave the 2 dogs in one a decision. I mean, the dogs came back to the owners. I realized they didn't even come back because it's the first time. Whereas the first time is the only time. Whereas now, because it's the first time, I see God there. I see no image of God. And how do I see this? Because you have to understand that the first time is everything. And the first time, God will be with you the first time. And now, how do I understand that is God? I need to understand, it's really, I see God in the no image. I mean, I never labeled it. Although I see darkness, I see it's rainy, I see that the dogs only have one chance. I open the dogs, I realize I opened the gate the first time, and I understand that God's going to be there the first time with me. I'll show you why. I'll show you although that no matter what, I see that the rainy day and the security risk around the dogs to leave, and the decision for the dog to come, or else for the 2 dogs to come here with us in terms of I am a biological dad, because it's for I, in Jesus' name. You understand? Because I understand what happened. And now I'm describing it right now. And they chose to come into the home with us. You understand? Because it's us that have them right now. You understand? And they only chose to come back with us, and they never chose to come back. Or they just chose to come with us. Because it's the first step. And it's the first time it's ever happened. Whereas the first time is the only time. You understand? So what can I say here? Whereas what I can say is, today, I had a decision to make. And I said, shall I open the gates again? So the dogs can just run around. Although it's not for the dogs, although for I. And then I said, I look at the day this time, whereas the day is actually, I realize it's actually daytime now, whereas there's no storm, whereas there's no darkness, I realize the lights are all happening, I realize it's happy now. Whereas everything's happy outside, and it seems that the dogs will really love to walk around this time. I promise you, if I open that gate the second time, I need you to understand that God gives no second chances. Whereas there's no second chance in life. I mean, there's only a first time. I promise you, if I open the gates the second time and the dogs walked out, I promise you they'll never come back. How do I see this? How do I see that the dogs will never come back? I remember that I opened it once, and to open it twice signals that I never ever treated the dogs. I realized that if I opened it twice, in terms of the gate twice, I realized that it means that I never would have treated those dogs poorly, or for example in a way that is poor, because I'm not poor. Whereas it's really that I never treated those dogs poorly, and that's why I only did it the first time. In a sense, so realize that whatever's happening now is I'm teaching you something. You only do it once. You only listen to the music once. I fell in love with Armin van Buuren and his music. Because why? Because I listened to his music over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, more than once. Understand? I realized that suddenly I need to create trance music because of that. Although now I understand that Armin van Buuren is not even the definition of why I create trance music. Why is that? Because I listen to his music one time now. Makes a new track, I listen to it right away, and I never listen to it again. I realize that everybody deserves one chance in life. I gave Armin van Buuren 50 million chances to listen to his music 50 million times. Understand? So I grew inspired by him the more I listened to his music. Let's just put it that way. Now since I listened to his music one time, I realize it's just a unique song like everybody else. I mean, it's equal. I mean, 1 is equal number, or else 1 is an equal number. I mean, 1 is an even number too, and it's an odd number as well. You understand? So no matter what, I mean, 1 is all there is in I. And now you have to understand with the dogs, I realize that it's really different because I used to own a dog, and that dog is the only dog I had. I have now, always. I always have now. Although I have more than before. I will say something though, that if I get a second dog in my life, I would die. I promise you, I would die. Because why? Because I already owned the dog before. And it means that if I get a second dog, or else that's the same lifestyle. I promise you that that dog will be the misery of my life. I promise you now, that first dog I have, I promise you that first dog that was with me, I promise you I didn't treat it really excellently. I treated it really poorly. And I was around 8 years of age. I was around 8 years of age. And now you have to listen to me, that I was unaware about what I was doing. Although the dog was living in a small space and shitting everywhere. And I understand that no matter what, I was never even ready to own a dog. I was never ready. And now I got what I asked for. I asked my biological dad to give me a dog. And he gave me a dog because it's the first time. I can always ask the first time round for anything and I shall receive it. I promise you that no matter what, that if I go to anybody and ask anybody anything the first time round, I promise you they'll give it to me. You understand? I promise you now, it's really that God gives it to you. I promise you now that no matter what, I promise you, you ask and you shall receive. Although you ask in the first way only. And now the first way to ask anything is to do it first. You do it and then you shall receive it. Because to ask something is to do it and not to just ask a question. Whereas now you have to always be in that moment of state of mind where you understand to do it one time only. Whereas now I can do anything around Australia one time. I mean, as soon as the one time is up, I have to go somewhere else. Because otherwise, this Australia gets old and it starts to kill me. Because I can never be around where the same places are. I mean, it's like you went to Melbourne and you've seen Melbourne. And it's like you're going there again. I mean, how old? I mean, what are you going to do there? You've seen everything already. I mean, why would you go again when you've seen everything there? You get? So you never do it again. You do it once, and that's that. You do it once, you never do it again. So, for example, when I open the dogs, I realize when I open I gate over here, whereas it's my gate, which is my biological father's gates in I, you have to understand though, that no matter what, I open the gates. I did it one time. I promise you God is there, watching. I promise you now, I looked, and I can see God in the imagination. And I can see how big God is. I promise you, I can see how big God is. And now God is the darkness in the dark sky and the wind that's blowing. And also the rain is raining. I realize the rain is raining and it's raining and the trees are. And I open the gates and there's no lights. And I can see that imagination. You can imagine a dark place. Although there is, I realize I didn't see stars. Although you have to understand that I seen this darkness place. And God's looking at me there. I opened the gates. And now the dogs ran away just for a bit to just see around and what's around the place. Well, I looked around and I see chilly. I mean, everything's chilly. I mean, it's getting cold. You understand? I mean, I just let the dogs out to just see what's going to happen and then call them back to see are they going to come back in. You understand? I look at the imagination over here. I realize that the dogs start to walk back and my dog just turns around like this. I mean, gives the kind of look like this. You understand? I mean, I feel chills right now because you have to understand. You have to understand that if those dogs left that day, I promise you they would have died. I promise you this is how. Because if I open the gates again when it's daytime, you understand? And now there's no whoosh going around, and there's no rain going around, and there's no rain going around. I realize no matter what, I'm never the same. I realize I'm never the same. Whereas although that this time there's always lights, I realize it's a happy day. I realize now for the second time, I promise you if I opened again, I promise you those dogs will never come back. I promise you now, when I have, in terms of when I used to own a dog, I let it out for free. I promise you now, I treated it poorly. I treated it so poorly. You understand? And I just put it on the ground. I was around 8 years. I was around 8 years of age, and I let it free. And I see to understand what it's gonna do. Otherwise, it just ran away. It just ran away. It just started walking all the way up there. And now, during that time, I realized it was daytime. I realized that was the first time I let a dog free. I promise you, that was the first time I ever done that. You understand? And the dog never came back. I promise you that what I realized though, that it was daytime when I done that. I promise you, it was daytime when I let that dog free. And the dog just chose to go. And that's God saying, you're free to go. Because it's daytime. Alright, now that's the dog's signal. You understand? Because that's the signal of God. You understand? Because the daytime signalizes that if you let animals out in daytime, they'll run away. Now I let 2 dogs out during the nighttime. And it's whooshy and stormy. You understand? And why is that? Because God set it up like that. And it's the first time round. Again, although the second time round, if I chose to open the gates, I promise you it's daytime this time. It's daytime the same time when I left that dog, in terms of I helped the dog, or I gave the dog an ability to run away during the daytime. If I open these gates again, for the second time round, it's daytime, the dogs will run away. And there's 2 occasions right here in one, where I see God showing daytime with the dog that ran away with I, and now this time to open the gate twice means that there is daytime this time. It's not a coincidence. Actually, God sets up everything in one. So I promise you that no matter what, I promise you if I treated that dog nicely that ran away, that dog would have never ran away even in the daytime. It would never ran away. Although, because I treated it poorly and it was daytime, I promise you that is why the dog ran away. And now that dog I realized that dog found its owner, because I understand that. I understand that these dogs, that if they never even came back during the nighttime, which are my 2 dogs here that my biological dad owns, I let them go in the night. Now, if they ran away in the night, they will die. Because that's what God says in the actual nighttime. Do you see how I see that? I see that. Although, my dog, I realize if I left these dogs to go out of the gates during the daytime in the second time round, they run away, because God says it's daytime now. You can run. I promise you now, that is why my first dog that I owned before, you have to understand, that dog ran away in the daytime. And that's how God signals animals through day and night what to do. Understand? So you have to realize that the dog, I realized the dog, in terms of the one I owned, I promise you, I treated it poorly. You understand? I treated it poorly. And it was daytime when the dog ran away for free. Because guess what? I let it be for free. Although I understand it's the best decision the dog ever made. I was not ready to even own a dog. I'm still not ready to own a dog. I promise you that if I went to grab a dog now, I promise you that it'd be the death of me. That dog, I apologize. I'm not even ready to own a dog now. I'm 28 in one. I realize my age is 28. I'm not even ready to have a dog. Understand? Although I understand that because that dog was treated poorly, and when I set it free in the daytime, I promise you, it just went. Because it sees the daytime of God. And God saying, daytime, just free. Just go. And that's how God speaks to animals and everybody. Through daytime and nighttime. And through time. Understand? Because daytime signals good. And nighttime signals no. Do not go. And these two dogs that I let for free to go out for free. I promise you that it was nighttime. And it was storming. And it was raining. And the trees were and it was like a storm. And there was no lights. And some lights were just dimmed. And you have to understand that lights over there is something different. Although around me, whereas there was no lights. And there was just this massive heaven of darkness everywhere. And the dogs just went this way. And it's really sprinkling. The dogs said no. They just came back to the owners. Understand? Because that's how God speaks like that. God speaks like that in darkness and daytime. When a non-human animal shall go, and when they must never go. How beautiful is that story? And I have a beautiful image of God here describing this. You understand? Because I understand that image is an imagination that you see around the world. You see the Sydney Harbour Bridge? Brother, that's not Sydney Harbour Bridge. Brother, that's an imagination of Sydney Harbour Bridge. Although you don't know what that is. Although that's God. Brother, that's what I've seen. Brother, I've seen an imagination of God. And now, you have an imagination of me right here. Although you don't know what this is. You can never describe me. You can never describe I here. Understand? Although you can describe I. You can describe I and what I is. Although can you really? You can never describe I either. I love you. What is I? I don't know. I just understand to never cut it off. Because Jesus said, do not cut your eye off. Understand? I can always know my I. I can know the I of life. I don't know what the meaning of I is. I just have to use it to speak. Because that's how I will increase my confidence. Understand? So, do you understand how God speaks now? Through day and night? You can see the two nice, beautiful imaginational patterns I gave you about the dog who I owned ran away because it was dead, or else it was daytime, and I treated it poorly. Understand? And now these dogs I treat amazingly. These dogs, I treat them amazingly and great with my biological father. Now the two dogs, or else the two boys in one. Whereas I only believe in number one in I. Although you have to understand that I'm speaking the truth here, or speaking the truth here in a way that I understand that it connects to the truth. Understand? Now, you have to understand that words lie. You have to understand that what you can see about you have to understand that words do lie too. Although when it adds up, I realize it's truth. I realize when it doesn't add up, I realize it's a lie. I realize that the words can speak truth if you connect it. Although when it doesn't connect, I realize it's a lie. And now you have to understand that these dogs I treat amazingly beautiful, and I feed them and I take care of them and I pat them and I don't hit them. I don't do anything to treat them poorly. And now my actual dog that I had before, I never hit it before. I never hit that dog. Although it was treated poorly because it was just in one little room and I couldn't take care of it. I could not take care of it. I never had the time to take care of it. And it was shitting everywhere. And you have to understand, I never hit it. I fed it. I just left it there in one laundry room. I was not able to take care of it. And that's why I let it free. And when I let it free, I realized that what happened was that it was daytime. And the dog just went. Because that's what God signaled. It's daytime. I will find you a new owner. I promise you now, when it was nighttime, when I left the dogs to go out, in terms of I never go out, although I never left the dogs. Whereas it's really that when I gave the dogs an opportunity to go this time, I promise you it was nighttime. And I realized God's now signaling, no, you don't go because look at the storms. Look at the rain. Look at the trees. Look at your owners. They give you everything they ever need. They give you a house. I mean, they give you shelter. I mean, they give you safety. And it's nighttime. I mean, look at the storms. I mean, if you decide to go, you'll never come back and you'll never have food and you guys will die, is what God's saying in the nighttime. You can just imagine that. I promise you now, if the dogs believed anything of cruelty in my life, you have to understand the ones that are with us right now in terms of my biological dad, in terms of I am my biological dad, you have to understand that if they left, I promise you they'd die. And that's the test of God. I promise you now, God's not a killer of a God. I promise you now, if I chose to have another dog in my life, I promise you I would die too. I promise you it's the same scenario. Understand? Because I already owned a dog. I already had a dog. I mean, why would I get another dog? I mean, I'm not even ready to have a dog. I mean, if I got a dog right now, I'd start crying. I'd start being miserable. I promise you. I already had a dog. I mean, it's like if you went and you've seen Australia. I mean, why would you go there? I mean, you've done everything there. I mean, you've done everything in Australia. I mean, you public speak there. I mean, everything under the blue sun. I mean, why would you even go there in the first place anymore? I mean, you've been there. I mean, you've walked the whole place. Understand? So I've already had a dog. I mean, once you do it once, you never do it again. I mean, I opened the gate once. I opened the gate once. I never opened again. I opened the gate once to help these dogs just walk free. I promise you, I opened it only once. Because if I open it again, or else God's saying it's daytime. I mean, get the fuck out. Understand? Because it was daytime one day, or else it was showing me daytime. On the second time round, I was wondering to open the gate so the dogs can just walk out in the daytime. Whereas now, if I did that, I realized that the dogs would have ran again and never come back. Because that's what happened with the first dog. Although I understand that I treat these dogs amazingly, I also understand that if I do something twice, or else it never works out. Understand? Or else it never works out doing it twice. I realize that Albert Einstein said that you never do it twice, you do it once. Because those people who do it twice keep it going. Understand? When they keep going the twice route. And when they do that, I mean, when you keep going the twice route, you become insanity. You become crazy. Understand? Because thieves of life go on number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. I mean, they have to have sex with multiple women in all these ways the same time and always doing it that way, in the same way. Or should that people who are doing it the same way will always die. Understand? So that is why I never open a door. In terms of I never open the gates so the dogs can run out in the daytime. I mean, even though they're not my dogs, I realize it's my biological dad's dogs. And that's the only reason I have them anyway. I realize it's because of my biological dad that I have these dogs. Because I'll never have these dogs if it wasn't for him. Roshi, now my biological dad never ever owned, I realize my biological dad never owned dogs before this. Roshi, now he never owned dogs. And now, finally, he does get a chance to own dogs. And these are his only dogs that he's ever had in his life. And that's the only time you ever have dogs. And now, you have to understand that if you have a dog that's been with you for 14 years, and it passes away with you, you deserve another dog. You deserve another dog because it's still one time. I promise you that one of my friends, I realize she possesses. I realize now, you have to understand that I am my best friend. You have to understand that it's really this woman. You have to understand that no matter what happens, I understand that everybody's my friend in a way that I understand that I'm my best friend. Understand? So you have to understand that no matter what, I realize this woman has a dog and it died 14 years later or something like that. I understand though, I don't know how long it's been since that dog died and how old it was, although I realize that nothing is old. And now it passed away with her. And then guess what happened? I realized that she got another dog. You understand why? Because she only ever owned the dog the first time. Even though it passed away, you still deserve another dog. Even though your dog passes away with you. Understand? Because as soon as you say no more dogs, you'll never get another one. Whereas if you own a dog for 14 years and you give it away, you'll never ever have another dog in your life. Because if you do, you'll die. It's that simple. And that's the story of God in this sector. Although I understand that God keeps going. And now, you have to understand that is the same way as me saying, in this scenario, I have a beard. I have a beard. I mean, if I cut this beard off, I'll never grow it again. You get it? I'll never grow the beard again because I've already had it. I mean, so what do? I keep it. I keep it for life. Personally, that's how I am. Personally, that's how I look now. And now, I need you to understand that whatever happens, I need to always have a new hairstyle. I have to have a new beard. I have to have something new going on with my face. So I'm always doing something new. As you can see, this is like a hairball. Although, guess what? This is going to grow. I've never had that before. And now you have to understand that when this rat's tail goes all the way long, I have it for a certain period of time. Once I cut it off, I'll never grow it again. Just one time. Just one time. Because what's the point of growing it again when I've had it? That's the same thing as saying, what's the point of having another dog when I've had it? It's the same thing. If I grew this again, how stupid. I'd die. How obvious is it that it is just not the way to go? You understand? Whereas now I'm growing this hair, for example. I'm growing my hair and I'm growing a big rat's tail over the back. You understand? I'm growing this massive rat's tail. Although it's going to be massive and it's going to be like this thick and it's going to be shining through the back. Whereas if I cut that off, I'll never grow it again. So what do? I plan to keep it for life. Over 100 years of age. Over 110. I'm just going to grow it all the way. Understand? I can imagine myself from 110 years of age, I have this massive hairline going down the back. That's amazing. Understand? So realize that once you grow it, you never go back. Once you grow the beard, you never go back. Understand? So realize that no matter what, that I taught you now what my image of God is. And that's just one image. I have many images, that there is only one image of God. You have to understand that the imagination outside of you is also God, although it's something that you cannot describe. And now, that dark place where I seen the dogs go, and I just remember that it's whooshy. I understand it's raining. I understand God has clouds in the air. I realize it's darkness. I realize there's lights dimmed. And it's a perfect scenario to say to the dogs, you listen to me. I promise you can see what I'm doing here. I promise you, if you go away, you will have to go through this. Do you imagine God saying that? Do you imagine God saying, it's stormy. It's rainy. It's whooshy. The guy's going to close the gate. Can you imagine yourself being the dog? What would you do? You run off into the owner's house, because otherwise it's unsafe. You can imagine the dog and being the dog, and God's talking. I realize God's talking to the dog. The dog's wondering. You have to understand. Although you can see what they are believing. You understand? Because God's saying, the tree. You can see the tree. You can see it's whooshing. You can see it's raining. You can see it's cloudy. You can see it's dimmed. You can see it's stormy. You can see it's nighttime. You can see your owner open the gate one time. One time. I promise you, the second time round you run. The one time you must come into the owners. Because the one time, yes, you go by the one law. I promise you, there's only one God. I promise you, there's no two gods. I promise you, don't get two chances. I promise you, get one chance. So the first time I did open it, I realized it made sense for the dogs to come with me. You understand? I promise you, that was the first time ever I opened the dog. I promise you, I see, you don't ever say in life. You have to understand, it's really, I opened the gates for the first time in my life. I've never done that before. I promise you, the first time, and that's how God does that. I promise you, God does it the first time round. I promise you, God goes and sees all these scenarios the first time round. I promise you, now when I looked and I seen God there, I see God, because I cannot describe that imagination. I cannot describe what I've seen. Although it's something like you cannot describe what this is. You don't know my name. I'm not Danny Milivojevic. I'm I. I mean, what is I? I mean, I is something that you cannot describe. You cannot describe I. You don't know what I is? Now, that's the same thing that I see. I realize that I've seen with God. I mean, you cannot describe that because it's cloudy weather. You have to understand that it's cloudy weather and it's also dark and it's dimmed and it's a dark place. And it's a street and there's grass, although the grass is very dimmed into darkness. And it's a alleyway and it's a dark road. I mean, it's a dark road for the dogs to go somewhere, although I do it for I. And now I can try to describe it as much as I can. I can say there's no other fences and there's no neighbors around and there's no cars around and there's no children around and there's also no birds around and there's nothing singing. Well, she's dead. Now, you can imagine the dogs. I mean, it's rainy, it's cloudy. I realize it's cloudy, I realize it's rainy. You have to understand, I'm always I, I'm not the ego. Although, I opened the gates one time. And now, if the dogs ran away, that's the first time round. And that means that they're going to die. Understand? I mean, it means that if you don't abide by the one rule, and if you don't go the one way, only you will die. You only get one chance in life. You don't get two chances. You get one chance. You don't ask for second chances. You get one chance. You can ask for the first chance. You can ask always for the first chance. I never asked for the second dog. I have the first dog already. I already had it. You understand? I already have the dog. I already have the dog now because I remember the experience anyway. I remember the experience of having the dog, and that's all you need. Understand? So realize I already have another dog. I have dogs now. I have the experience of having dogs. And now, for me to be able to attract another dog, I have to ask somebody else to attract it for me. So what do? I realize now, you have to understand, it's really that. Approaching now, if my wife or kids need a dog, I get them my dog. I have a dog again. Approaching now, that's the only way I can attract a dog. Although, I can never just go into one of those holes where the dogs are and where they're caged to get a dog for myself, because that would mean the death of me. That's it. Because that doesn't work out. And why doesn't it work out? Because I'm not ready for it. Although I'm ready to have a dog with a wife who needs one, I'm ready now. I can have one now with her. I can have a dog with a wife. I mean, it's her dog. I mean, it's not my dog. Understand? I can have a dog with her. I'm happier to have a dog with her than to have one with myself now. Understand? Because I've already had one. I'm happier that my kids may have a dog. I mean, I can have a dog. I love dogs. I love dogs. I mean, what's the difference? I mean, the difference is that I cannot attract another dog. I mean, it doesn't work. I've had one already. I have to stick to the one because I cannot open that gate again to let the dogs out at the same time because I'll die. I'll die and the dogs will run away. You understand? Because you cannot do it at the same time again. I mean, it's like, you have to understand that it's like you going and smoking that one cigarette over and over again. I mean, how ugly is that? You're smoking a cigarette first of all, and you're smoking it again and again and again, and you're not learning from it. You become addicted to it. I mean, you suffer with it. I mean, you stay old the whole way through because that cigarette is always going to be a cigarette. Understand? And you stay to the same packets. You give the same amount of money for the packets. You smoke the same amount every single day. You understand? So it doesn't work out. I understand though that it's just the one law of the universe. You follow the 10 Commandments of God, which has a one in it. I mean, the 10 Commandments has one law. You understand? I promise the law is God. You follow God, and that's that. Rosh, the one law is the only chance you get. Rosh, there's only one eternity. Rosh, there's no two eternities. You understand? There's one eternity. There's one Jesus. There's no two Jesus. You understand? There's one Jesus. Now, I have dogs. I love these dogs. I love them. I love them so much. Although I cannot get my own dog. I've had one. I have one now. And now, the one that I have is I. I'm everything. I don't need a dog. I have I. I'm richer, better. Although I understand that is now a nice, beautiful story I gave you. And you can just picture what I've seen that day. I mean, you can imagine it in a way that you can understand the wisdom behind it is what you need to picture. And it's really how one dog that I was never able to take care of ran away in the daytime, and how these dogs never did in the nighttime while it was stormy and all that. Although in the second time round, which is there is no second time round, although in this time round where I may have opened the gate twice in the same instance, I approached it in the same instance. I approached it in the same routine. Although now it's daytime. Approach it doesn't matter. You see, it doesn't matter because it's still daytime and nighttime. Approach it doesn't matter. Although the daytime signals it's good and the nighttime signals no. Understand? So that's the law of God. Approach God says yes in the daytime and God says no in the nighttime with non-human animals. And you. So if you do something, for example, in life where it may be a no, you look at the daytime. For humans, it's a daytime thing. Where when it's a daytime, you look at the sky and is it daytime? Because if you're doing something the same in the daytime, you're no good. Now, if you're doing it in the nighttime, that never happens. It never happens. Now, what doesn't happen? That you can never do something no good in the nighttime where God can signal you a no. Although you can, now you have to understand that this happened in the daytime. Although I understand the fact, which is now, you have to understand it's really that you understand that I've realized God will signal non-human animals no in the nighttime. And God will signal you no in the daytime. I realize that now this only adds up when it's the non-human animals and the humans together. That's that. Now it's like a crisscross type of scenario. You understand? So it's a crisscross. It's like a yin yang. And it's a message only when it's between you and the animals in terms of non-human animals. I realize it's the only way that it's ever going to be. I realize that it's 1,000 ways that you can be a no in the nighttime when it's humans and humans. I realize that if you go and drink alcohol in the same pub in nighttime and it's still nighttime every single night, that's a no. And God's signaling you no in the nighttime. I promise you, if you go and you go to the same pub in the daytime, you go to the same pub. You drink the same beers in the daytime, God will say in the daytime, no. You understand? Although in the crisscross of non-human animals and also humans, the signal is that the animals in the nighttime never go away from the owner. And also in the daytime, you have to understand that you never open the gates twice and never do anything twice. So you have to understand it's really, they can go either way. Now, the deal is you stick to the one path. And the one path is a signal that is the best signal of God. And it just means that no matter what, that if I let the dogs out twice in the nighttime, I promise you now, the dogs will run away this time. I promise you they'll run away this time. Let's just put it that way. It's the same scenario, and I go and open the gates again with the same dogs, and it's nighttime, and it's whooshy, and it's raining. The same time. That's a signal that God says, run away now. You go, because it's this number 2. Whereas now, the dogs remember number 2. I realize now when you remember number 2 in somebody else, or somebody else does number 2, or you do number 2, you have to realize what you've done. You have to realize that number 2 never works, and it means run and go away. That's a signal, and the only signal of God is 1 and 2. Now, the only signal that God ever has in life is just number 1. Although, you have to understand that the real signal is number 1 of God. And that's the only signal. You just stick to that signal. You have to understand that now, God gives you the notion between night and day, and also 1 and 2. In terms of the number 1 and number 2. So, you have to understand, I opened the gates the first time round with these dogs. You understand? Apparently, the first time round, apparently they come back. I mean, let's just put it that way. Apparently, if they ran away, apparently it's night time. You can see it's my first time opening the gates. Apparently, that if they ran away from number 1, apparently they die. Apparently now, if I open it again, apparently if I open the gate again and do the same routine in the same kind of structure, and it's whooshy and it's raining in terms of pouring rain in the way it was in the same fashion, and also the dims of lights, I realize the lights dimmed and everything's the same fashion and the same imagination that you have. Although now you open the door twice, apparently the dogs will signal number 2. So the dogs can actually read number 1 and 2 too. I realize that they can actually remember your action steps and what you did. You have to understand that these dogs, I always go to them onto the gate and I always try to reach for them. Unfortunately now dogs, unfortunately they see me doing that many times. Unfortunately they never respond anymore because they understand that it's no good. I understand it's no good now. You understand? Because it's something I did with the dogs many times. And now it shows me something about I too. That I never again do that. Because if you go and reach across the gate and try to touch the dogs 50 million times, virtually it signals no good. Because you've done it so many times. You've done it at the same time over and over and over again, that the dogs now, I mean, they just understand that you're just old and that you're not doing them any good. I understand that now. I promise you that's where my cruelty is with the dogs. You understand? Although I understand now to change it because I was unaware. You understand? Although, I promise you, I opened the gates the first time round. And now the dogs can picture this. And they can understand that the first time round, I've never done this before. And the dogs can actually remember now. Right away. I promise they can remember right away. And you have to understand that God's saying, it's rainy. I promise you, it's storming. I promise you, it's cloudy. I realize it's night time. I realize he's done it the first time round. I promise you, the dogs came back right away. I promise you, they didn't run away. I promise you, now I've got some nice beautiful clues over here. I promise you now, if you understand me now, that if I did it again, I mean, I'd be the guy who always reached for them for the same amount of times. I mean, that doesn't go, does it? I mean, that's cruelty in a way. To always reach for the dog in the same kind of way. I mean, that's cruelty. Understand? Although I was unaware. And now listen, if I, in the same instance, again, for number 2, I never do it for number 2. Although, you have to understand that if I open the gates the same way that I did the first time, they run away this time. Because they read number 2. Now, dogs are that smart. And you have to understand, it's really simple. I realize it's really simple mathematics between 1 and 2. And just don't do number 2 anymore in your life. And that's how you'll live longer. You live over 110 years of life. And more. As long as you follow the one path. So if you ever need to live long, I mean, just go do number 1 in life. And do it one time. And do one action one time. And don't do it again. I mean, don't do the same action twice. You will live this life to 100,000 years of age. I promise you, there's no doubt about it. I promise you now that it's still that. You understand? I promise you, that's the game of God. And now, Jesus, you can never picture Jesus. You can never picture Jesus. And that's the amazing thing about God. Because Jesus is never to be pictured. Because the ego tries to label Jesus about the image of God. And you can never label the image of God. Just like what I've seen. I mean, I can never describe that for you because it's an imagination. You understand? I promise you now, I'll give you an example of how I will do this. I realize that no matter what, I have a nice beautiful room over here. I have a room over there. And now, I'll show you that it's got a wall. I promise you it's got a wall. And I promise you that you haven't seen this part over here. Although, you understand? I mean, how am I supposed to describe it? I mean, there is a nice beautiful cupboard there. And there is some cassette tapes. Understand? I mean, there is a nice beautiful lamp. And what kind of lamp? I mean, what is it called? I mean, there's a mirror. And there's also a heater. And what color is the heater? Or it's a grey heater. Or it's also got a box. I mean, do you understand how that imagination in terms of what happened? I mean, how was I supposed to actually give you that information spot on? Because the ego will try to label that imagination, although it can never do it. I mean, it may do it in parts and slow parts. You understand? Although it's not going to give you the actual picture that you need. Personally, that's what I mean with this. Although I'll show you what I really mean. I approach you now. That labeling never even came close because that labeling that I gave you is really the ego trying to label that. You understand? So you can never label God. And that's why Jesus can never be labeled. And that's why we have God. I mean, you can see God in the message. You can never describe God. You can never even picture God. So that's where God is. Understand? Unfortunately, that's the truth. Understand? And now the words are honest and it adds up. You can say so. Understand? So realize this, that when I come sit in this room, you have to understand, I have to always be changing the way I sit in the room. So if I come sit on the couch the first time, the second time around, I have to come sit on this chair here. I have a chair here. I have to sit on the other chair. And then I have to sit on that chair. And then if I do anything, I have to come sit on this chair now and not on that chair. Why? Because I can never do it twice. Understand? I promise you, if I sit on this chair and get up, I have to sit on that chair. Because if I promise you, if I stand up and sit on this chair again, that means old thinking. And I realize that's the old ego. And that's you doing it twice. So if I stand up from this chair, or if I stand up from this chair and sit back again in the same chair, I realize that's old-minded. Promise you, if I stand up and I sit on a new chair, yes, you can. Now, if I stand up from that chair and I get up and sit up on this chair, I can. If I stand up again, I sit on that chair, I promise you I can. I promise you, if I get another chair altogether and I sit here and I sit on a new chair, I can. I promise you now, I can do anything, although you must never sit on the same chair twice. You must never do something twice. You must change up. You must change it up differently. I promise you now, I went to Cairns, for example. I went to Cairns, and I understand my video is 1 hour, although I'll give you more. I understand that no matter what, I realized that when I went to Cairns, I was there for 2 months. I've seen the area many times. I mean, how old is that? I mean, once you see the area once, you're supposed to go. Although, I understand because of my finances, I realized that's why I stayed there for 2 months. I promise you come to a small area of suburb, in terms of Busby here in Sydney, you see the area once, you fuck off. You never come back. Now, it's like me being in this little one area of Busby for 2 months. I mean, how old is that? I've seen the area already. And I've been there for 2 months. I mean, that's old. I mean, it's old-mindedness. And now, since I get the pleasure of going around Australia for 1 year and 4 months, you can imagine that in Melbourne alone, I've been there for 4 months. And now, most people, because they work the 9 to 5, I realized they go there for the weekend for 2 days. And I've seen all this for 4 months in Melbourne, and they only get they get 2 days of the weekend to just see Melbourne. I mean, look at the difference in time span of how much I've seen Melbourne and how much they've seen Melbourne. I've seen 4 months of Melbourne. I mean, they've seen 2 days of Melbourne. And then, so realize that you have to understand that right now, you have to understand those people who seen Melbourne the first time, I promise you, that is all they get. You understand? I promise you, that is all they get. I promise you, they have to go somewhere new now because they've seen Melbourne already. I went to Melbourne already. I've been there 4 months. I've seen Melbourne. I have to change now. I have to go somewhere else. Although, what's the difference? I realize they've seen Melbourne for 2 days. I realize that they've been there once. I realize once is more than enough. I mean, they've just been there 2 days though. I realize I've been there 4 months. I realize that it's once and it's more than enough. Although I understand twice in that. I realize I've been there twice in one. And now it's really one time. I mean, let's just put it that way. Because I was unaware about the Melbourne. And now you have to understand that you can still go Melbourne. You can still go, even though you've been 2 days, you can still go Melbourne to see the rest of Melbourne. I promise you, although you don't go Melbourne, Australia, to see the same aspects anymore. I promise you now, if I see the whole Australia as quickly as possible, I promise you God will say, now, go. I promise you God will say, go, because you've seen everything that there is to see in Australia. I promise you God will open up and give you some money to go somewhere else because you've seen Australia. So no matter what, I promise you that's the whole point. You have to go and do something new that you've never done. So realize that you stick to number one and not number two. You understand? You never do the same action twice. Because whether it's daytime or nighttime, I promise you that God will be speaking with you during the day and during the night about everything. As you see with the dogs. You understand? So it's a beautiful story about God. And it's a story that I really have to understand much better. That you have to understand that you can never ever describe that imagination that I've seen. Although it's a terrific view of God. I mean, wow. I mean, in the dark. And it's in the dark. And I understand what went on. And I understand that God did all that. I mean, God made the tree. Shh. And God made the rain. Shh. You understand? And also, God dimmed the lights. And God had just darkness in the air. And God had clouds and an alleyway. And it's never done before. I mean, the first time, because this is the first time I've done that with the dogs. And you can just picture God. You can picture God. You can never describe what I've seen. Although that's how big God is. I mean, God's so big that it's the whole imagination of God about that scenario, and what I felt in that moment is all God. I mean, you can just describe that. Although I will say that on the day, my first dog ever that I ever owned, I promise you when they left, I promise you left on a sunny day. I promise you that's God too. I promise you God saying, sunny day, you can just go to another owner here today. Because I treated the dog poorly. And that was the first time I left the dog out. I left it free. I never left. Although I left in a better way. So realize that no matter what, I promise you that dog that I owned the first time round, I set it free them one time. It never came back. And when a non-human animal doesn't come back, I realize you treated it poorly. Understand? Although I'm still not ready for a dog. I don't know why. Although dogs have never really been something fashionable in a way that I could hold them in life. I was never able to hold a dog in my life. You understand? I mean, you have to understand me. That no matter what, that even if I grab the dog today to own it and to even rent it out, I mean, even to have it around me, I realize that I'd never be able to. Although I understand if I rented it, I realize that's different. I realize now, if I rent a dog, I realize now I owned a dog before. I realize I owned a dog. I realize now if I rent a dog, I realize now it's probably the same thing. I'd say that it's the same thing. I realize although I understand that it's different. I realize now I can rent a dog for a day. I realize I've never done that before. You understand? I can rent it. Whereas before I owned one. Understand? So realize that no matter what, that there is an opportunity where I can actually rent a dog and be giving some money. Understand? Or that's different. Now, that's a new pathway that actually opened up just now. I can go into the nice, beautiful aspects of that scenery, where that dogs are, or realize where the dogs are, and I can just say, I'll have one to just rent it out. Because I've never done that action before. I realize now that is my gateway into having a dog. I realize now that's different. I realize I can have one. Although to own a dog, no. Because I've owned a dog before. I realize now, did I really own it? I realize that I was given one. I was given a dog. And now, to own one, I realize I've never owned really a dog. Have I? I don't know. Because I understand that there is a difference here. I understand the difference is that I have to own one. Although I never own one, I just rent one. Whereas now, there's a difference though. I understand that now, I can rent a dog. I can. And now, is it one time? Probably it's one time. Probably one time I can. Although, what changed? Whereas what changed here? Whereas what changed is the fact that I never have to own a dog. Understand? I realized that I limited myself to owning a dog. Understand? I can never own one. Personally, that's why I never even deserved one. You can never ever own a dog. You can never own anything of this world. So if you try to own something, you'll never have it. Because my ego was trying to own it and trying to possess it. And was trying to say that this is mine. Understand? Personally, now everything that you see around me is rented. I can never own anything. Or as Jesus says in the Bible, that this world is never to be owned. You can never own this world. You can only see it and experience it, and that's that. I understand, though, that the rules of 1 and 2 is always going to remain, and so will day and night. Understand? So that imagination you see about how big God is, I realize that's the same imagination of Jesus. That's Jesus. I can see Jesus in that. I can see Jesus. I can see that Jesus, I can never label Jesus. I can never see who Jesus. I realize that you have to understand that I can see who Jesus is. I'm not blind. Although I can never label Jesus. I can see the imagination of Jesus. I can see God's prize in the world, which is the imagination. You understand? I can see everything about life and I can describe it. Although you have to understand that it's only that I can see it. I can never really describe it. I can never describe the imagination I see. I don't even know the meanings of the war of, or that's not a war behind me. Or that's an imagination of something. Although I don't know what that white space is. Actually, that's not even white color. Actually, it's not a white color that. Actually, that's not a white color. Actually, I don't even know what that is because the label is the ego. Actually, the ego tries to label what color that is and what color this is. Actually, this is not the color that you believe it is. Actually, it's an imagination though. And that's God. Understand? Because that's God right here. Understand? Unfortunately, this is Jesus. Unfortunately, this here is something that you cannot describe. Unfortunately, it's something that Jesus is. Because Jesus cannot be described. You cannot describe this. Because that's what Jesus is. I see God everywhere now. And now, since I understand how big God is, I realize that everything I've ever seen around Australia for 1 year and 4 months is God. In terms of the imagination. And now, the more your imagination in life, I realize that when you travel the world for half your life, compared to somebody who never traveled, you understand that you have half a life of your imagination, which means you have half a life of God. And now those who never traveled and have no imagination have no God. Do you see how important traveling is? You understand? I realize that if I have 10 years worth of traveling and imagery over you, you have to understand that I have 10 years more of God than you. I have 10 years more of confidence. I have 10 years more of I have 10 years more I have 10 more years of richness. I have 10 more years of everything unlimited than you because I've seen the world more in terms of imagination than you. You understand? I realize that now, in order for you to go travel the world as much as you can, first, it's the best way you can find out about God. Because God is the imagination that you have not unlocked yet. First, now, it's the imagination that you have not unlocked yet. So where have you not been? First, that's where God is. You understand? Because that's where one time is. if you've not been to Spain, or if you've not been to China, if you've not been to Russia or any of the countries out there, now you'll be doing it the first time. And that's where God is. And now if you do it the second time round, you'll not see God anymore. Although you have to understand that God's not in the two of life. God's in the one of life. So if I went to Melbourne to see Melbourne again, God's not with me anymore. God's gone somewhere. God's not even watching me anymore. You understand? Because why? Because I went to see something that I've already seen. You understand? So what will God see me about in that? God will watch me doing public speaking event in Melbourne. That's different, because that's a different experience of Melbourne altogether. You understand? Because I've never done that in Melbourne. I promise you, God will also go and watch me doing a DJ event at the Crown Casino over there, because I've never DJ'd in the Crown Casino. That's something different that God will experience and be with me on the day. Whereas God will be there with me on the day, because that's the first time. God's only with you on the first time and on the first occasion. You understand? I promise you now, if you're having sex with one person who is different, look-alike, you have to understand that God will be with you when you're there the first time round. The first occasion you have sex with somebody, God's there with you. Although when you're having when you have sex with them in a different manner, God's not there with you anymore. You have to understand that God's only with you when you do it once with one image of God. And now there's only one image of God. Although what I'm saying is you never have sex with the same people. You have to understand that God's never with you when you're with the same people. And now I realize that God's with you when you're doing something new, even though you are with the same people. You understand? I promise you, although, that it's really that God will watch you one time having sex with someone new, and that's that. I promise you now, if you're having sex with that individual over and over again, I promise you God's finished. I promise you God doesn't even see you anymore doing that. You understand? Because you've had 50,000 times you've had sex with the same individual. I promise you God's not there anymore. I promise you the first time, yes. I promise you the first time is the best time. I promise you now, what do? You have to understand that many people get married, for example. I promise you they get married and they're having sex and sex and sex without a kid, for example. I promise you now, that is the reason God shows up again. I promise you, God shows up again in your life when you're having a kid. You understand? You may have sex the first time round, although you have to understand that God will show up in your life the first time round. And it doesn't even have to be with a kid. God will watch you having sex with whoever that is new. I mean, the first time round. And then what happens is, you to have sex with them again without having a kid, God will not be there for you anymore. Understand? Although if you are having a kid with them, God will sneak and watch you. And then that's where the child is created in that moment. Because God is there the first time. Understand? God will create your kid in God's image, because you're creating a kid now. And it's the first time. So if you're creating another kid with the same individual, God's there again with you. Now, the more kids you have, the more God will be with you in those moments of you having sex, because you may have a first kid. Although the second kid, you've never done a second kid. So God will be there with you the second time round when you're having a kid. And will watch you having sex. You have to understand that God right now is watching me doing this video, because I've never done it before. God's around me right now. Because I understand it's my first time doing it. Understand? God's watching me right now. It's really that simple. It's because it's my first time and I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it. And understand that now I wear the same clothing inside my house over here. Although, you have to understand, it's really my first time wearing this. I mean, why is it my first time? Because I didn't get any new clothing other than this and what I have over here. And it's still my new clothing. Otherwise, I'm still looking new. Although, if I throw this away and I get another jumper and then I wear this again, oh, whereas now I have no more God in this jumper. Whereas I look old then. Although I'm not old. You understand? So that's how people get old. Whereas that people get old when they have no gold. I realize people get old when they have no God. You understand? Whereas that now, I said I'd be doing 1 hour videos. Although I do 1 hour videos and more. Whereas the whole point of this video is to teach you number 1 and 2. Whereas now, you have to understand that those people who went to Melbourne have 2 days of time span around Melbourne. And I've already said that no matter what, that when you travel around the world, you can always understand to speak in a different way and to make sure to go and see more imaginations in life. So when you see more imagination, you will understand that you have more power in God and that God's more with you. So those people who I've seen from the past for 1 year and 4 months have been in Sydney only, while I went around Australia to see new imagery for 1 year and 4 months. I mean, new imagery. Understand? So I've seen more than them. I see more than I see more God than they do in that 1 year and 4 months. I promise you, because I went around for free. Understand? And I promise you, God will always give it to you for free, because you are searching for a new way of life. So if I chose to go around here in New South Wales, for example, and I chose to go to Newcastle to see new images, now I've never been there. I've never been there. I'm sure God says you can go now. You can go there now, and I can give it to you now. You understand? I promise you, I can go there the first time around. I can go to Gosford to see Gosford. I can go to anywhere around Sydney and New South Wales that I've never been there. I promise you, I can go there now. I promise you, it's paved the way. I've got the money already to go. I promise you now that what's better is to be where it's free. And now God says it's much better for you to go where it's free than having to give money for it. Understand? So if you're somebody who needs sex, realize that free sex is much better than giving money for it. You understand? So go where the freeway, or as you go where the freeway is. So the freeway is here in my biological father's house, because my biological father is giving money for the rent, and also no matter what, I have money. So no matter what, I get it from the government. Although understand this, that no matter what, that all the money in the world is in the information I'm giving you. Understand? Russia, that plastic money is printed. Russia, that can always be printed. Russia, that what this wisdom does is can help, or else it can help you over and over again for life. And now you have to understand that each and every time you listen to my videos and audios and anything, you only listen to it once and you move on. Or else that when I read something, I may look at this video and it could be the same image of something I read before. So I just go and click on a new video that I've never actually heard the tones about or the information about, and I read that because it's something new and it's a new direction. Understand? So only ever read my audios and videos and body language once only. You don't read it twice. You don't get this video and read it 50 times. And now that's what I did with Robert Kiyosaki, for example, and all of this. And now that's different because I learned something about that. You have to understand that each and every single time you learn something from the video, it can help you. So you stick to that. Whereas that you can watch this video as many times as you can, as long as you're learning something from it. It's that simple. Although one time is the ideal. You don't need to read this. You don't need to understand this more than once. I promise you that it's really my tones, or else it's my tones. Is my tones. Or else is my tones. You understand? I realize that the body language is one time you can understand the imagery one time. Whereas the tones, you can understand that one time. Whereas the words is 7% of the communication in one, and it's the words I say. And that's one time you can understand it. And now if you don't know any words, you can go search up the meaning of those words. Understand? I promise you it's pretty straightforward about what I say. I promise you it's pretty straightforward. You can read the whole video once, and I don't care if you're ADHD or whatever you are. You can read it once. Understand? I promise you if you keep reading it, and reading it, and reading it, you will eventually sum up the ability to do this anyway. because that's where it goes. You understand? So no matter what, you can read my videos as many times as possible, and it's going to lead you straight to God. I mean, it's going to lead you straight into the information that you need, because that's what you need. You get it? So no matter what, I watch a video one time. I do it one time. I have, for example, just done this. I went to my biological dad's aquarium, and he has fish in it. I never threw out those fish. I mean, I never threw them out, and I never killed them either. I went and I picked up all those fish. I realized there was 7 of them. I realized there was 7 of them in one. I realized that no matter what, I got all those fish. I threw them down the drain. In terms of the fish, in terms of the toilets, I went and placed them in the toilet, and I flushed the toilet on them. And now my biological father says that he gave $1,000 for it, although it unlocked a beautiful imagination in me. And it means that one guy previously said that there was one guy who went into the aquarium and he's really searching to get all these fish. I realized that is what he said. And then I had all this imagination going with it, although he said that the fish is so big. He said that the fish is so big and he's holding a gun. I realized the guy's holding a gun to penetrate the fish in a scuba diving outfit of an aquarium, such as the zoo one, for example, where it's so big and the fish is so big, although he's trying and he has all these flippers and his scuba diving gear, for example, and he's talking this about his friend. Understand? And I had this massive imagination about this. And then I went here and I threw out the fish. I realized I was the guy trapped with the fish inside the aquarium. Understand? I mean, when I imagined that guy who had that gun inside the aquarium with that fish, I realized that was I who was trapped with the fish, because the fish are trapped in the aquarium. I understand now how it feels for a fish to be trapped in an aquarium like that. Because I can imagine you being trapped in that aquarium now. I mean, I'll just put you there and I'll feed you once a day. Understand? Unfortunately now, no matter what, you have to understand that when you feed yourself once only. You don't feed yourself once a day. You feed yourself once for your whole life. Understand? So no matter what, you can imagine yourself. You can imagine I being in that fish tank and living with the fishes, while the owner, or whoever's the owner, comes and feeds us. And we're just in that fish tank. I mean, what a life. You understand? I mean, what would the fishes be saying? I mean, get us out. I mean, let us go. Understand? I promise you now, dogs are different. I promise you, dogs are different. I promise you now, dogs are do or die. Understand? I promise you now, even fishes are do or die. Although fishes would rather go to the ocean right now and be set free. I realize that if you ask a fish, I mean, would you rather be in the fish tank or in the ocean? I promise you that the fish will say the ocean. I promise you, if you ask a dog, would you rather be with the dog pound or with the owner? You understand? I promise you the dog will say with the owners. Because where else do the dogs go? I mean, they get killed. Understand? I mean, they get thrown into the gas, and people put the gas on and they die together. Because you have to understand dogs in life. I mean, a hyena is a dog, although a hyena is different than a dog. I mean, it's still a dog, or it's a different dog. I mean, they're the wild dogs. I mean, now these dogs that you really see with humans in terms of companions, I realize that they rather go with the humans. Whereas dogs rather go with the humans. And now if you ask a cat, would you rather go, or realize if you ask a cat, would you rather go for a human or would you rather go into the wild? Unfortunately, no matter what cat it is, unfortunately, they'll never go with humans. Unfortunately, they'll never go with humans. So if you hold a cat around you, Actually, what the cat will do is the cat's so smart that it will come for food and fuck off. I realize the cat will maybe jump in your house for a bit and then will fuck off because the cat cannot live with humans. You understand? I promise you the dog can. I promise you the dog can always live with humans. I promise you that the dog is one of humans' best companions. And a dog, I understand, gets killed so much around humans. Because as soon as a dog goes in the pound yard where they are dogs and full of dog yards, in terms of the dog yard, and the dog goes to the dog yard, now it's rare that humans go into the dog yard to find a dog. And now they give them 8 weeks. And then they put an injection into the dog and the dog dies. Understand? I promise you now, if you ask the fish, if you ask the fish, I mean, where would you go? I realize they will go to the ocean. I promise you. And no matter how much they have babies in the fish tank, I promise you, those babies will say the ocean, please. I promise you, even the babies will say that. I promise you, it doesn't matter. I realize that God will say, you put that fish somewhere new. I promise you, God will say that. I promise you that it's the same thing as saying about your babies, and you have one room like this, and you have kids with your wife or husband in this room. And now you have to ask yourself this question. You have to understand that it's much better that you let your kids go into another part of the, I realize it's much better to let your kids go into another world other than just this room. I realize that's the same fish tank room. You understand? So realize, no matter what, that when you have fish, or when you, for example, are living in one space, you much rather be in a better space, or in a wider one, or in a bigger one, where your kids can also enjoy other parts of the world and not just be in one room in Sydney, because there is also Spain to go to, and there's also Europe, because that's an ocean. Do you get it? And that's where the fish want to go. The fish want to go to Spain. They want to go to Europe because there's the ocean there too. Understand? So why keep them in the aquarium? I mean, even in the zoos. You have to understand that zookeepers keep these fish at bay when the fish want to go to the ocean. And no matter how much babies they're having in the aquarium, of course, they still want to go. And even their babies and babies and babies and babies and babies want to go to the oceans. You understand? Because that's what God wants for you. God wants for you to go around Europe and Spain and Barcelona and Ibiza and everywhere and achieve your life to the best of its ability and not be held captive in an aquarium like fish. So allow yourself to go. And when you have fish around you, I mean, go and make sure that you do it once and just get those fish and throw them into the drain and shove them down the drain and just make sure you flush them. Understand? And now, when I flush them, I mean, who's to say that they died? I mean, how are you supposed to understand that the fish died? You never know that. You never know that the fish died. I promise you that God can do anything when people are not looking. You understand? I promise you they went to a better place. I promise you now, the fish told me that no matter what, I promise you, you let me go. You let me go. You just put me down the drain then. I promise you, those fish would rather go down the drain than sit in that freaking aquarium. You understand? I mean, what would you do if you were the fish? I mean, would you rather be in an aquarium all your life, or would you go down the drain of the toilet? I believe that you'd rather say to go down the drain of the toilet. Understand? So no matter what, I realized that's what I done. And I didn't kill the fish. I realized that what happened is God took him. Well, God just, and they disappeared. I mean, they went to a better place. I mean, let's just put it that way. And no matter what, I did that the first time. So if my biological dad goes to actually put the fish again and again, I realize again and again, I realize that my biological dad goes and places the fish inside the fish tank again, and he goes and gets, or else if he goes and gets new fish and places the new fish inside the fish tank, you have to understand that this time I cannot do it. Although I can, although I will never do it the second time round. You understand? Now, I've done it the first time. I've done it the first time round. If there are fish there again, and I do it the second time round with the same individual, understand? And in life, apparently now it's no good. I mean, why? I realize it's because I done it the second time, and now it's not really what I need anymore. Although I understand that nice, beautiful imagination I had about the guy who went into the fish tank and had this gun and this massive fish in it, and he's swimming in with it. I realize that is I, although not anymore. You understand? Because I let the fish out. So as soon as I let the fish out, I promise you that imagination escaped me in terms of I. Because that imagination doesn't count anymore. Because I felt trapped like the fish. I felt trapped in that aquarium with the fish in that imagination. Because somebody else gave me that imagination. And I felt trapped in that aquarium with that fish, with that gun. I can see it in imagination. So when I let the fish go, I realize that imagination no longer counts anymore. And I feel free. I feel free now because I understand that is not me anymore. I realize I let the fish go. I'm free and so are the fish. Understand? I escaped the prison of me being in the aquarium with the fish. You understand that I was swimming in the aquarium with the fish and trapped with the fish. And as soon as I escaped the fish, in terms of I let the fish go, I never escaped anything, although I'm still in the moment. You understand? I let the fish go, and that way I helped I relieve the I. I relieved my I. I relieved the I. I understand now that it's no longer I who is that person in the fish tank. Because I escaped it. I actually helped the fish get away. So I'm still in the moment. I realize as soon as I let the fish go away from the fish tank, I also am set free. Because you can picture yourself being that fish man or fish woman inside a fish tank with a fish and how that feels in life. I mean, you feel trapped, don't you? So when I escaped, in terms of when I helped the fish to escape, actually you don't have that problem anymore. Understand? You feel trapped. You feel trapped because of that. So what you do is you go and untrap some fish and you throw them down the drain, and then you'll never have that imagination ever again because you don't feel trapped anymore. I felt like that because I had that imagination inside of me, because you have to understand that the fish who are here, in terms of gone now, although they're here still somewhere, you have to understand it's really that as soon as I let them go, I understand that I also set myself free. Because that's how I feel. As soon as I help you become financially free, I feel more free too. It's the same aspect. As soon as I help you to have more food and have free food, I also will have free food. I realize as soon as I help Jesus do something for free or whatever, in terms of that nature, or I help bring you to Jesus for free, I also feel for free to be with Jesus. Understand? So realize that you don't feel trapped anymore about that aquarium. Understand? I realize that when you're in an aquarium and you feel trapped with a fish, I realize it's because you may have fish around you in a fish tank. Understand? And as soon as you let go of the fish and drain them down the toilet, you won't feel trapped anymore either. Actually, that's all I say. I realize although that God works around number 1 and 2. So as I said this story in this video, which is make sure that you follow number 1 and make sure that you change up your routine. So realize that if I get a new jumper, and I then put this one back on, you have to understand that it's really that this jumper now is brand new. And even though I wear it around the house every single day, probably it's still new. Although when I replace it with another one, and then I wear this one, probably that's when I became number 2. Although I'm not number 2. I realize that I never become number 2. I'm not number 2, I'm number 1. So what I do is I wear this jumper only until I replace it. I don't go get new clothes. I only need one set of clothing. And now I have one set of clothing. I have my outdoor clothing and I have my indoor clothing. And now my outdoor clothing is really my indoor clothing, and my outdoor clothing is also my indoor clothing. Understand? So no matter what, I understand that my indoor clothing is just my indoor clothing. I realize that those are my one set of clothing. I realize it's one set. I realize this is one set that I have, and then I have another one set. I only keep one set of clothing. I realize now, as one, I realize it's one set of clothing for one aspect of life. And that's that. I realize that's how I minimize everything and become minimal. And I don't grab another hat until I throw this one away. I realize that I have one hat, for example. I realize that I wear that hat until I need another one. Although, guess what? I have one now. You understand? I have one now because the whole point is to just wear that hat. And if I ever get sick of it, I realize I'll get another hat and I'll throw that one away. Because otherwise, if I get another hat and I go back to the older hat, I realize then you would become old. Understand? So I never become old, and I just stick with my new clothing and new way of life. So that's the whole point. Understand? So Jesus works in number one, and Jesus is something that you cannot even fathom. I mean, you cannot describe the imagination. Just like, you understand? I mean, I showed you the imagination there. I mean, it's like you're trying to describe what Jesus is. I promise you cannot describe what Jesus is. And I promise you that even if you try to describe that that's a box, I promise you that's not a box. You believe that. Although that's not a box. Understand? I promise you now, this, in terms of this, I promise you that's not skin. I promise you that's not called skin in life. Understand? I promise you that's not skin in life. I promise you that's not the image of God. Although, you have to understand, the image of God is something that you can never even describe. Or you don't even know what wisdom is. You don't even know what information you actually know. Because I only know I. Whereas I must know. Because that's God. Whereas I is God. Whereas now I is God. And now everything is related to I. Whereas I is everything. And now when you're actually teaching people something about I, you will always have something to say. Understand? Because God is always there with you first when you got something to say. You have to understand that there's always something to talk about. So talk about as much as you need to, although just make sure you're doing God's work every single time. I understand that in this video, I gave you a nice, beautiful picture about God. And it's really Jesus. And now when I say Jesus, I mean, there's no image coming up anymore. Or else that they say that there is an image of God that may represent Jesus that comes into your life. Because many people who go and act like Jesus may show up. Although that's not even Jesus. If you go and see the statue of Jesus, I'm pretty sure they'll see a man. I'm pretty sure you'll see a man. That's not Jesus though. I'm pretty sure it looks nothing like Jesus. You understand? I'm pretty sure it looks nothing like Jesus. You cannot even describe Jesus. You cannot even describe the imagination around you. I mean, how are you supposed to say that? I mean, how are you supposed to call the imagination around you? So that nice, beautiful scenery around the dogs, where I experience God there, I realize that it's a black skin. I realize it's a black scene. I realize it's a dark skin. I realize that it's a dark scene in life. And I understand it's the first time. Although I understand that dogs and animals and anything in life can understand the first time. So if you ever need to speak with dogs and animals, you speak with them the first time. So I understand that now, since I unlocked my nice, beautiful potential, I understand my dogs right now. I promise you I have to go do something new with them that I've never done. And I never again will go up to that fence to say hi. Because it's not worth it. I can already feel that. I realize every time I went to see those dogs, I promise you they never gave me what I needed. Or else I understand why. Because I was always reaching the same way for the dog. You don't just reach for the same way. You go in and then you run around in a different way. Or you do something different with the dog that you've never done. And that's one time action. You don't do the same action over and over and over again. Because the dog will just turn around and start licking himself. I mean, you're saying, come here and come here. And the dog understands that you've done it 50 million times. So the dog will just start licking itself. You understand? And now, I'm not twice, I'm number one. You understand? So realize that information, for example, is driven. And will always be repeating a different way. Or she'll always be a different way. So that's why I love to do this. Because it's always a different way. I'm pretty sure you always stick to a different way. You do something a different way. So if you love to place, for example, an object, or else if you love to place objects in a certain way, or else now you can change it up, and you don't have to always place your laptop and phones on the table. And just that. You don't have to do that. You can do something different. You can mix it up. You can put something else on the table. Instead, you can put your shoulder bag on the table. You can put your food somewhere different. You can change up the table and put it somewhere different this time. So you understand that it doesn't have to be there. You can change it up in terms of your house. And where is your house? Your house is inside. Although understand that life happens once and you don't sit on the same seat ever. You don't be with the same people ever. You have to understand that since I did come here with my biological father, I realize it's the first time ever. Actually, that's the first time ever. Because this time, I have a wiser opinion, I have a stronger eye, and it's free. So anywhere where it's free, I can still be here. Understand? I promise you, if I was never allowed to be here, although I'm here, I'm always allowed to be here. You have to understand, it's really, if you're not allowed to be somewhere, I realize it's because you're doing it twice. You understand? So what you do is you do it one time. You do it one time, you can't do it. Or else, I mean, how did I even muster the courage to go and let the dogs out for the first time in my life? I mean, the first time is more enough to do the courage. You understand? I promise you, the first time you can do it. You can do anything the first time. I promise you, now, what have you not done the first time? I promise you can go and do it. You have not quit cigarettes, you can quit cigarettes the first time. You have not achieved $1 million, you can achieve it the first time. You can achieve it. I promise you it's possible to achieve it the first time. I promise you can do anything the first time. I promise you the second time around, you can never do it the second time around. You can never achieve $1 million the second time around. I promise you, by the time you achieve another $1 million, you have $2 million now. I promise you it's a difference. I promise you it's not another $1 million. I promise you it's now $2 million. You achieve the first million, you achieve now 2 million. You don't achieve another second million. You don't achieve a second million ever. You achieve 1 million, and then 2 million, and then 3 million, and then 4 million. And that's always the first time. You understand? Although when you achieve a kid the first time, you also achieve number 2 the second time, and then 3. Although you don't achieve another one, although you do. You can also achieve another one. Understand? Although another one means a different one. Understand? Or it's not the same one. You have to understand that you achieved the first $1 million, or you would have achieved it in one type of way. And then the second million that comes up into your life is achieved a different way. You don't achieve it the same way you did before. If you achieve one kid, I promise you don't achieve the same kid anymore because the kid is already born. You have to understand that your second kid is going to be different because if you have the same kid as before, you'll never even have kids in the first place anymore. You already achieved the same kid. Although you understand that you never achieve the same kid. And you never will. So each and every single time you have a kid, I realize that the kid's going to be different. And now if you achieve twins, you achieved one kid in 2, in 1. You have to understand that twins is just one. You understand? Because they're the same, although they're going to be different throughout life. You understand? Now, it's just one time. You can only have twins one time. Understand? You can only have twins one time. You can never have twins twice. So anybody that you've ever met in life, you understand they have twins only once. I can have twins. Now, if you have twins once, you can never have it again. It's like if you have a dog once, you can never have it again. Unless you rent it this time. That's different. Now, when I was given a dog, it's like I was the owner of the dog. Because it's a given. You understand? Or else it's a given. So when I give you a dog, or else you're now the owner of the dog. Or else that's how I feel. Although now what I can do is I can actually go and rent one. I can go and rent one, and that's that. Or that's different. You can never just be an owner anymore of the dog. You've already done that. You've already been the owner. You understand? You can go and give someone, you can go give somebody a dog, you can give your kids a dog. But actually, no, that's different. You can never own anything of this world. You can just rent it out anyway. Understand? So no matter what, you just realize that God speaks in number 1 and 2. So anything that's number 1, such as this video, has never been done before. And it will never ever be done before, in terms of will never ever be done again in this lifetime. Actually, it's the only video you ever get from me. I realize this video is going to be one video and that's it. I mean, there's no other videos like it. Actually, I make music. Actually, now my music is just one music. Actually, there's no other music like it. Actually, my content, actually, every single time you listen to it, actually, it's different the whole way around. And that's how it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to speak the same words in life. You're supposed to speak different words. You're supposed to be living with different people. You're supposed to be going somewhere different. You're supposed to be doing different things from other people. You're not supposed to be doing the same acts that other people are doing. You have to do it differently. You have to do something different that they are not doing. Because that's where God is. Actually, God is where the different life is. And not the same way. Understand? Actually, God is not the same. Actually, the truth is the same. Although God's also not the same. Understand? Apparently, God is the same and the truth of life. Although God is also not the same and the truth of life. Understand? So realize that God is only one and number 2 doesn't exist. So where number 2 is, you have to understand that if you see a number 2 person, you stay away from them because God's not there. I promise you, if you see number 1 person, you'll see God there. I promise you, God is where number 1 people are. And that's that. Actually, if you're worse than yesterday, well, it's because you don't have God. Actually, it's that simple. Actually, if you're better than yesterday, actually, it's because you have God. And now, those people who are worse than yesterday, actually, they still have God. Actually, everybody has God to a certain extent. Although there's a difference between better than yesterday and worse than yesterday. Whereas Oprah Winfrey is worse than yesterday. Actually, she's worse than yesterday because she's fat. And let's put it like that. I mean, that's straight up honesty. And now, as a kid, in terms of her life, you have to understand that Oprah Winfrey at 15 was not that fat. I mean, what happened? I mean, why is she fat now? I mean, you're not supposed to be fatter than you are now. You have to understand that if I get fatter, I never get fatter. You have to understand I'm not fatter. Although I'm not making fun of her. I love Oprah Winfrey. I'm speaking the truth here. You understand the truth shall set you free. So understand that you understand this. You never look worse than you are. I mean, that's what I mean with Oprah Winfrey. Understand? Apparently, she looks worse than she did before in terms of her body weight and size, is what I'm saying. Understand? So, you always have to improve yourself. I can always help people, and the whole point is to do so. So, every single day, speak the truth, and even if they get hurt, I promise you, if they get hurt, you will change their life. Understand? So, no matter what, you listen to the silence every day, and that way you will also understand to just let go and be courageous. I mean, be courageous and understand when you're finishing your videos, you're not finished. You're just going to arrive in a better way. And that way you're going to understand there's always something better to do. I'll see you guys in the next video.